have to ask me nicely. You see, Danny, I can deal with the bullets and the bombs and the blood. I don't want money, and I don't want medals.
Picture this. Jack Nicholson, the ultimate Hollywood wildman, suddenly vanishes from the spotlight. No more movies, no more Lakers games, nothing. Rumors are swirling about his health, but the truth is a mystery. Let's take a trip through Jack's incredible life and try to unravel what's really going on with this legend. You know, it's strange to think that one of the most electric, larger-than-life personalities to ever light up the silver screen is now living quietly in the shadows. I'm talking, of course, about Jack Nicholson. This guy was once the epitome of Hollywood stardom. That mischievous grin, those wild eyebrows, that "here's Johnny" charisma that just grabbed you and didn't let go. He was the actor every other actor wanted to be. But if you've been paying attention lately, you might have noticed that old Jack has been conspicuously absent from the public eye. No new movies, no interviews, not even any courtside appearances at Lakers games. For a guy who once couldn't escape the spotlight if he tried, this sudden vanishing act has left a lot of us scratching our heads. And unfortunately, the rumors swirling around Tinseltown haven't been too encouraging. There's been talk that Jack, now well into his 80s, is facing some pretty serious health issues. Memory loss, cognitive decline, whispers of the dreaded D word, dementia. Could it really be that the Jack of all trades, master of madness, the one and only Jack is fading away? Well, as with most things in life, and especially when it comes to an enigma like Mr. Nicholson, the full story is a little more complicated. So let's take a journey through the life and times of Johnny R. Nicholson and see if we can't shed some light on what's really been going on with our favorite Hollywood hellraiser, early life and career. Now, if we're going to understand Jack, we've got to go back to the beginning. And trust me, this guy's origin story is a doozy. Born in 1937 in Neptune, New Jersey, Jack's birth certificate might as well have been stamped with a big old question mark. See, his mother, June, was a bit of a free spirit, a showgirl who wasn't exactly keen on settling down. So when baby Jack came along, the family hatched a bit of a white lie. Jack grew up believing that his grandparents were his actual parents, and that his real mother, June, was his older sister. It wasn't until a Time magazine article in 1974, when Jack was nearly 40 years old, that he learned the truth. Talk about a bombshell. But in true Nicholson fashion, he took the news in stride, saying, "I'd say it was a pretty dramatic event, but it wasn't what I'd call traumatizing. I was pretty well psychologically formed." Anyway, fast forward a few years and a teenage Jack, fresh out of high school, decides to follow in his sister June's footsteps and make his way out to La La Land. He starts out working odd jobs, including a stint as an assistant cartoon animator, all while cutting his teeth in acting classes. The 1950s and 60s were a bit of a slog for young Jack. He managed to land a few bit parts in some low-budget B-movies, schlocky stuff like The Crybaby Killer and The Little Shop of Horrors. But he also got his first taste of life behind the camera, co-writing the screenplay for the 1967 counterculture flick The Trip, starring Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper. But it wasn't until 1969 that Jack finally got his big break. And oh, what a break it was. His supporting role in Easy Rider, the quintessential counterculture road movie, earned Nicholson his first Oscar nod and catapulted him to the upper echelons of stardom. The 70s were calling, and Jack was ready to answer. Career highlights. When we think of Jack Nicholson's career, there are a handful of roles that immediately spring to mind. Roles that didn't just define Nicholson's career, but that left an indelible mark on the very fabric of American cinema. First and foremost, there's his turn as the rebellious mental patient Randall McMurphy in 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Directed by Milos Forman and based on Ken Kesey's novel of the same name, Cuckoo's Nest saw Nicholson at the height of his powers. His McMurphy was a force of nature, a brash, anti-authoritarian rabble-rouser who refuses to be broken by the soul-crushing conformity of the mental ward. Nicholson's performance was nothing short of revelatory, a masterclass in the art of acting. He won his first Academy Award for Best Actor for his troubles, And Cuckoo's Nest went on to become only the second film in history to sweep the Big Five categories at the Oscars: picture, actor, actress, director, and screenplay. But Nicholson was just getting started. In 1980, he re-teamed with director Stanley Kubrick for a little film called The Shining. Perhaps you've heard of it? Based on the Stephen King novel, The Shining featured Nicholson as Jack Torrance, a struggling writer who accepts a job as the winter caretaker at the remote Overlook Hotel. As the isolation and supernatural forces of the hotel begin to take their toll, Torrance descends into a homicidal madness, terrorizing his wife and psychic son. Nicholson's unhinged performance, "Here's Johnny, anyone?" elevated The Shining into the pantheon of all-time great horror films and gave us one of the most iconic movie maniacs in cinema history, and the hits just kept on coming. Throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, Nicholson continued to churn out one memorable performance after another. There was his turn as the Joker in Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, a role that set the standard for comic book movie villains. His Colonel Nathan R. Jessup in 1992's A Few Good Men, snarling the immortal line, "You can't handle the truth." His Oscar-winning role as the misanthropic novelist Melvin Udall in 1997's As Good as It Gets, proving that he could play prickly and vulnerable in equal measure. All told, Nicholson's filmography is a testament to his incredible versatility and staying power. 3 Oscar wins, 12 nominations, and countless indelible performances. A true titan of the silver screen, personal life and relationships. But of course, when it comes to Jack Nicholson, his off-screen exploits are almost as legendary as his on-screen ones. Throughout his career, Nicholson cultivated a reputation as one of Hollywood's most notorious Lotharios, a serial womanizer whose appetite was as voracious as his acting talent. Nicholson's list of conquests reads like a who's who of 60s, 70s, and 80s starlets: Michelle Phillips, Angelica Houston, Lara Flynn Boyle. Even Meryl Streep wasn't immune to his charms, briefly dating Nicholson before coming to her senses and kicking him to the curb. But it was his tumultuous on-again, off-again relationship with Angelica Houston that would come to define Nicholson's personal life. The two met at his birthday party in 1973 and quickly became one of Hollywood's most glamorous power couples. But their romance was far from a fairy tale. Houston would later describe Nicholson as an errant, mad, bad boy, and that, to say that he was not a good boyfriend is an understatement. The final straw came in 1990 when Houston learned that Nicholson had impregnated a young actress named Rebecca Broussard. Nicholson would go on to father 2 children with Broussard, daughter Lorraine and son Raymond. All told, he has 5 children from 4 different women. In his later years, Nicholson has expressed regret over his tumultuous personal life and the pain he caused to those closest to him. In a rare moment of introspection, he admitted to a Rolling Stone interviewer, "I was an extreme womanizer. I'm not proud of the fact, but I was." Despite all his success and acclaim, Nicholson has also hinted at a deep-seated loneliness and a sense that he may have prioritized his career over his personal relationships. "I've had everything a man could ask for," he once said, "but I don't know if anyone could say I'm successful with affairs of the heart." Leaving the spotlight. Which brings us to the present day and the question on everyone's mind: where in the world is Jack Nicholson? The last time most of us saw Jack on the big screen was in 2010's How Do You Know, a romantic comedy co-starring Reese Witherspoon, Paul Rudd, and Owen Wilson. Since then, Nicholson has largely retreated from the public eye, making only a handful of small cameos and rare public appearances. In 2013, he was spotted at a Lakers game with his son Raymond, looking noticeably thinner and more frail than we're used to seeing him. And in 2019, photos surfaced of Nicholson sitting alone on his balcony, staring wistfully into the distance. So what happened? Well, depending on who you ask, there are a few theories. Some say that Nicholson simply grew tired of the Hollywood grind and decided to retire on his own terms. Others point to his advancing age and speculate that health issues may have forced him to step back from acting. But the most persistent rumors suggest that Nicholson may be struggling with memory loss and cognitive decline, possibly even Alzheimer's or dementia. In a tragic twist of fate, the man who once so masterfully portrayed characters losing their grip on reality may now be facing a similar battle in his own life. Of course, it's important to note that these are just rumors and speculation at this point. Nicholson himself has remained characteristically tight-lipped about his current state, and his representatives have declined to comment on his health or future plans. What we do know is that Nicholson is now 85 years old and has largely retreated to his longtime home on Mulholland Drive, a sprawling compound he's owned since the 1970s. He reportedly still sees family and a few close friends, but rarely ventures out in public. It's a far cry from the Jack Nicholson of old, the man who once said, "I'm definitely still wild at heart, but I've struck biogravity. I can't hit on women in public anymore. I didn't decide this, it just doesn't feel right at my age." Now, it seems, he's content to simply fade away, to let his legacy speak for itself. The method behind the madness. But to truly understand Nicholson's genius as an actor, it's worth taking a closer look at his approach to his craft. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Nicholson wasn't a classical theater-trained actor or an adherent of any particular acting method. Instead, he relied on his instincts, his natural charisma, and his uncanny ability to inhabit a character from the inside out. In a 1986 interview with Rolling Stone, Nicholson offered a rare glimpse into his acting philosophy. "I don't have any theories about acting," he said. "I just let the fucker rip. If I think too much about what I'm doing, it doesn't work. I just try to be the guy." It sounds simple enough, but of course there was much more to Nicholson's performances than just being the guy. He was famous for his meticulous preparation, his willingness to immerse himself in a role for months on end. For One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he spent weeks living in an actual mental institution, observing the patients and soaking up the atmosphere. For The Shining, he isolated himself in a remote hotel in Oregon, channeling the cabin fever and paranoia that would inform his portrayal of Jack Torrance. But perhaps the most striking thing about Nicholson's acting was the way he seemed to blur the lines between himself and his characters. He wasn't a chameleon like some actors, disappearing completely into a role. Instead, he brought a piece of himself to every character he played, infusing them with his own unique blend of charm, danger, and raw, unbridled intensity. It's that intensity that set Nicholson apart from his peers, that made him such a mesmerizing presence on screen. When he was firing on all cylinders, there was simply no one else like him. A force of nature, a live wire, a man possessed. Whether he was playing a rebellious mental patient, a homicidal writer, or a ruthless mob boss, Nicholson had a way of making you believe, of drawing you into his world and never letting you go. And yet, for all his intensity, Nicholson was also capable of surprising tenderness and vulnerability. Think of his turn as the retired insurance actuary in About Schmidt, a man grappling with the emptiness and regret of a life half-lived, or his performance as the misanthropic novelist in As Good as It Gets, slowly learning to open his heart to the people around him. These were roles that showcased Nicholson's incredible range as an actor, his ability to find the humanity in even the most unlikable or difficult characters. They were a reminder that beneath the wild man persona, beneath the legend and the myth, there was a real person. Flawed, complex, and deeply human. A life in pictures. Of course, no discussion of Jack Nicholson's legacy would be complete without a look at some of his most iconic moments on screen. These are the scenes that have become part of the cultural lexicon, the images that are forever seared into our collective memory. There's Nicholson as McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, rallying his fellow patients in a raucous group therapy session. "I must be crazy to be in a loony bin like this," he quips, his eyes twinkling with mischief. There's Nicholson as Jack Torrance in The Shining, his face twisted into a maniacal grin as he axes his way through a bathroom door. "Here's Johnny!" he screams, in a moment that's been parodied and homaged countless times. There's Nicholson as the Joker in Batman, his green hair and ghoulish makeup barely disguising the gleeful insanity beneath. "Ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?" he asks, his voice dripping with menace. And then there are the quieter moments, the scenes that showcase Nicholson's incredible range and depth as an actor. There's his heartbreaking monologue in About Schmidt, as he reads a letter to his recently deceased wife. "I know we had our differences," he says, his voice cracking with emotion. "But I just want you to know I loved you. I always loved you." There's his tender exchange with Helen Hunt in As Good as It Gets, as he struggles to express his feelings for her. "You make me want to be a better man," he says, his eyes welling up with tears. These are the moments that define Nicholson's career, the scenes that remind us why he was one of the greatest actors of his generation. They're a testament to his incredible talent, his fearlessness, and his unparalleled ability to connect with an audience. But they're also a reminder of the man behind the legend, the complex and contradictory figure who lived life on his own terms, for better or for worse. Jack Nicholson was more than just an actor. He was a symbol of a certain kind of American masculinity, a rebel and an iconoclast, a man who refused to be tamed or defined by anyone else's expectations. And now, as he enters the twilight of his life, it's hard not to feel a sense of loss, a sense that an era is passing. The Jack Nicholson we knew, the Jack Nicholson we loved, may be slipping away from us, but his legacy will live on forever. He was a true original, a one-of-a-kind talent, and a shining example of what it means to live life on your own terms. Legacy. And what a legacy it is. It's no exaggeration to say that Jack Nicholson is one of the greatest actors of all time. A singular talent whose influence on American cinema is almost impossible to overstate. From his early days as a counterculture icon to his reign as one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, Nicholson's career is a testament to the power of sheer charisma and raw acting chops. His filmography is a veritable murderer's row of classic performances: McMurphy, Torrance, Napier, Jessup, Schmidt. These are roles that have become part of the cultural lexicon, characters that continue to inspire and influence new generations of actors and filmmakers. But perhaps more than any single performance, what defines Nicholson's legacy is his fearlessness, his willingness to take on roles that pushed the boundaries of what was possible on screen. He was an actor who never played it safe, who always seemed to be chasing that next great challenge, that next opportunity to disappear into a character and emerge as something wholly new and unexpected. And yet, for all his bravado and all his success, there's always been an undercurrent of darkness and mystery to Jack Nicholson. A sense that beneath the mischievous grin and the arched eyebrows, there was a man grappling with his own demons, his own sense of isolation and regret. In the end, maybe that's what makes Nicholson's story so compelling, so endlessly fascinating. He was a man who embodied the very contradictions of the American dream, the boundless promise and the inescapable pitfalls, the dizzying highs and the crushing lows. And now, as he enters the final act of his life, it's hard not to feel a sense of melancholy, a sense of an era passing. The Jack Nicholson we knew, the Jack Nicholson we loved, may be slipping away from us, receding into the mists of memory and legend. But even if we never see him on the big screen again, even if he never graces another red carpet or flashes that devilish grin for the cameras, we'll always have the work. We'll always have those indelible performances, those moments of pure, unbridled Nicholsonness that remind us why we fell in love with the movies in the first place. So here's to you, Jack. Here's to the wild man, the madman, the king of the Hollywood Hellraisers. Your legacy is secure, your place in the pantheon guaranteed, and no matter what the future holds, no matter how the final scene plays out, we'll always remember you as you were. A true original, a force of nature, a shining star in the Hollywood firmament.